What's up, everybody? This is Office Hours, episode number 26. I think, right? 26, 26. Yeah, 26. This time we're talking about contracts. Nora, this time is on my left. How are we doing today?
I'm doing okay. Yeah. it's you know what it is? So my birthday is in 2 weeks. So actually our next Office Hours episode is going to be my birthday. And so Sto and I actually, I think it'll be a fun episode because we're going to just it's an ask us anything. We're going to ask each other questions. You can ask us stuff, get to know each other a little bit. So it'll be fun. But it just makes me so anxious.
What?
And even not our episode, but my birthday. Like the closer my birthday gets, the more anxious I get. And so it's just, my anxiety's there and I'm aware of it. And we're just going to breathe right through it.
You're going to be able to be out there for your birthday though, right? Like outside?
I mean, technically I will be vaccinated and I will be almost 2 weeks out of my second vaccine dose. So technically, but I'm not.
Okay, fair. All right, we're all over the place.
I'm staying home probably.
That's understandable too. I'm not going out there. Are you kidding me? There's no way. I'm not going out there. But we have completely derailed the train. But I hope that your birthday goes well, and I'm excited for that episode as well because I have a couple tricks up my sleeve myself. But in the meantime, we appreciate everyone for coming through. Make sure to leave a like right down below. It's in the description somewhere. It just helps this video get out to more people. There's something else I'm forgetting. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe. We upload every first and third Tuesday of the month. We do other stuff. We're all over the place as well, but we're on YouTube every first and third Tuesday. And then there's some other YouTube thing that I'm forgetting that all the comments. Yeah, leave an algorithmic comment.
And I mean, I'll tell y'all what would be really helpful to us is if there's, we love the love and we appreciate when we hear how the episodes resonate. But if there are questions or topics that you would like to see us talk about, that would be so helpful because we want Office Hours to be useful. So if you want to drop a comment about an episode or a topic or question that you have, then we can make sure we cover that in the future. So likes, comments, subscribing just really help us a lot to beat the algorithm.
Right. Absolutely. Cool. Today we're talking contracts. And I'm honestly surprised we've taken so long to talk about this topic because I feel like, especially now that the pandemic exposed a lot of stuff and faulty contracts and deals between people and obviously the capitalistic systems of the entertainment industry and stuff like that. But either way, we're gonna really try to deep dive into it and talk about why they're important. And honestly, even I hope to learn some stuff here because I'm not an expert on contracts and I'm just going to put that out there now. I am not an expert on them, but I do understand their importance and believe that they are important.
Yeah. And I think we should preface this conversation by saying neither Sto nor I are lawyers. So this is not legal advice. You definitely should, if you have, are in a contract negotiation or anything like that, have a lawyer look at it. But hopefully we can at least give you some tips in terms of what to think about or what to look for, how to approach the conversation. Because I know it can be awkward and it can be uncomfortable. And so hopefully we can ease some of that for y'all through the conversation. And maybe we just start there, Sto, around why are contracts so important and the purpose that they serve.
Right. Outside of we can talk legal stuff and all that all day, of course. But I also think it just, first off, they don't necessarily have to be, I guess, legally binding. I don't know if that's the best word for it, but you can have a contract that's more involved with for you and I, for example, a work contract where we're making sure that both parties are doing the same amount of work and all that type of stuff. So I don't want people to think that only labels do contracts and only like big businesses do contracts. Like whether smaller circles or bigger circles, like contracts can be important in multiple like places, I guess.
Yeah, well, so maybe we even start there, right? Like, what is a contract? All it is the agreement and terms between people on a project. So it doesn't have to be, to Sto's point, like between you and a label. Contract can be, how do we want to work together on this project? A contract can be, your split sheets are contracts, right? Like, how much percentage do I get? How much percentage do you get? And the reason why, I think they serve a couple purposes. I forgot the word. One is, as much as people enter a relationship with the best intentions, contracts help you go through the process of laying out, what is our process, what's your process, and what is the outcome that we're working towards. So it just helps you align to make sure you're on the same page. It prepares you for worst case scenario. So one of the things I hear so often from artists is like, oh, that's my friend. Oh, but I've known him forever.
Right.
Oh, but we go way back, which is all the more reason why you should have a contract. Because oftentimes when we enter any kind of collaboration, partnership, relationship, both sides are making all kinds of assumptions. And the contract makes sure that your assumptions come out of your head and onto the table where you can decide together, are we sharing the same assumptions? And exactly. What will we do if we're not aligned? So it really is there to protect both sides from all the best intentions. And then the other thing that happens is people forget. So we might have a conversation, come to certain terms, and then 3 weeks from now, 6 months from now, 3 years from now, sometimes, for example, it takes a while for a song to hit. So you don't start seeing revenue until like way down the line. You're like, oh, I gave you 10%, right? And the other person's like, nah, bro, we talked about 50. And so now, not because anyone's trying to be malicious, but you just really forget, right? And so being able to go back to the paper and say, okay, well, here's what we wrote down and we both agreed to, takes away all of the, it takes away all the like human error, right?
Yeah.
So contracts are really, really there to, at the most basic, to make sure everyone's on the same page and protect both sides. And then you can get really creative and start to talk about how contracts can also be a force of change or advocacy, and you can put all kinds of fancy schmancy things into your contract. But at the most basic, even with people that even with people that are friends, even with people where you're like, oh, this is just a quick, we're just going to do this one-off thing. It helps to at least, and this is, I think, so you were starting to talk about too, is it doesn't have to be like 46 pages of DocuSign. It can just easily be an email that says, hey, I just wanted to recap our conversation. Here's what we said. Do you remember it the same way? Mm-hmm. So even if, that might not be as legally binding, but it serves the same purpose of saying, we're going to talk about our terms and put it down on paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you articulated that way better than I did. So yeah, I guess with all of that being said, like, so like you mentioned, it doesn't have to be this huge 50-page, like, oh my God, like all of this stuff. But what I do run into sometimes is artists that are in some of those situations talking about, like, who should I have around or present or have read the contract beforehand. Now, obviously, like, getting a lawyer isn't always like the most, affordable option. So, I guess I would ask, like, what do you think is the best way to go about it if you can't get a law professional involved?
So
a professional in law, you get what I'm saying?
One is, I think that contracts are intentionally written in this like confusing way. And so for people who are creating contracts, writing contracts, you can choose to write contracts much more simply, much more clearly. And I think that's a trend or a switch that we can start to create. I do this very intentionally, like, to make the language accessible. So I think that's like on the pre-end, something really simple that folks can start to do. I always tell art, even if you have a lawyer look at the contract, you should still read it and like be familiar with it too. So in the beginning, it might mean, studying some terms and like Googling what does indemnity mean, or what is a right of first refusal, or whatever, like different clauses, because you'll start to see those things over and over again. And so educating and informing yourself, like this is part of your responsibility as like an entrepreneur, as a creative. So educating yourself. Sandroid says, word, I've been using Google templates and change the wording as needed. Yeah, and so there's tons you can just Google and find tons of templates where you can pick and choose and create something that works for you. In terms of having someone look at it, if you don't know a lawyer, you don't have a lawyer, which is legit, I understand. Find someone that you trust that is familiar with these things. You have a manager. I have my financial advisor look through all of my paperwork. So, find someone that you trust who, at the very least, can look at things and see the things that you've missed.
Right.
One thing that I would really caution you against, though, is sometimes someone will be like, oh, well, we'll have our lawyer go over it with you. Their lawyer has a legal duty to protect their best interests.
Right.
So, this is like when you hear artists who are like, well, the label's lawyer told me. Well, the label, you're not there
for the label.
They work for the label. So making sure that whoever is looking at it really is on your side, rather than, there to protect other people. Not to say folks are malicious, but those things really, really do come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess on my end with how how contracts work in general, sometimes when there is, I guess, not necessarily a disagreement, but maybe terms that you don't agree with, or maybe just something you just flat out don't like in the contract, how exactly do you go about that conversation? Because I've run into that too, where artists are saying the contract's not all bad, but there are certain terms where I feel like I'm losing something or my entity's losing something.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we should do a whole episode just on negotiation, because I think it comes up in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
One of the things to really pay attention to is, yes, the contract itself, the terms and things like that, but also how do you feel? Do you feel comfortable going back to this person and saying, you know what, can you explain this language to me, or can you clarify?
Exactly.
What do you mean by, or can we revisit these things? Because it should be a back and forth to make sure that all sides are comfortable. I once was in a negotiation where they were trying to they wanted to record my talk and take all the intellectual property to use forever. And I was like, I'm not okay.
Right.
Can we, and all I said was, can we talk about this so you can clarify the terms, because your language is unclear. And the lady said, well, I don't have time to explain this to you, and it's not really a priority. And so I backed out of the deal, because if you're not interested in me feeling comfortable and you're intentionally using unclear language, that tells me what it's going to be like to work with you in the future. So paying attention to things like that, where they don't want to clarify or have the conversation, is a red flag. When they rush you, you need to get back in 30 minutes, give it to me now. Huge red flag, especially when you've waited on them for a long time.
Yep.
And then they give it to you and we're like, oh, sorry for the delay. We need this back in 10 minutes. Those are all kind of strategies to make you feel urgency. And under urgency, you make poor decisions. So be mindful and don't be afraid to push back and set your own limits. And to just, it should be as simple as, what you said in item 6342.
Yep.
Here's what I understand it to be, and this would work better. So you offer them your counter, and then you can go back and forth. I think we often approach all kinds of negotiations as combative. You're trying to screw me over, I'm trying to screw you over. But in reality, you're on the same team. You're going to work together. And so if you can approach it as teamwork and creating conditions that work for both of you, then you're going to create a win-win situation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I wanted to go back and talk a bit about since I did such a horrible job earlier, is like really talking about why it's important, even if you're working with people that you know.
Yeah.
Because Sandra says an episode on negotiating would be super helpful. And Nora has taught multiple workshops on negotiations. Did I say that right? I hope I said that right. Oh my God.
No, you did say yes. So I do teach a workshop, and I'll probably offer one again in the next couple months, where we go into like all the tactics and tools of negotiation. You get scripts, all that kind of stuff. So if that's, I mean, I'm sure Sto and I will put together like one of these overviews. But if you want something more in depth, reach out to me and I'll make sure you know when we have our next negotiation workshop. It's one of my favorite things. One of my favorite things to teach.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, sorry, I got excited. Go ahead.
No, of course. And like, cause like that goes right into my just point of like why it's important to have those conversations, even with people that you know. Cause I see that, I think more and more, especially where like, you know, we talk a lot about networking horizontally. And I feel like in a lot of cases that finds artists working with their inner circles. But I think sometimes things get so tossed up, and especially when you're just working on music and you're doing just shows and stuff like that, I feel like if you don't have those conversations, I mean, I'm not saying like necessarily like immediately, but like I feel like if you wait too long down the line, people are just, you know, feelings get hurt. People feel like they're getting screwed, and feelings are harbored and stuff like that. So that's the point that I wanted to come back on, is like it really is important to have those conversations, even with people that you know and people that you trust. Yeah.
You're making me think about some of the things that, like, really, if you can identify potential problem points and then say, here's how we'll deal with it, then if that problem comes, you have, you know, like I said earlier, the blueprint.
Exactly.
So it's things like, when do you get paid? How do you get paid? Do you need to submit an invoice, or will they just send you a check?
Exactly.
Cancellation, you know, for those of you who are doing shows, what's the cancellation policy? If they
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Get paid. If they, you know, if they cancel altogether, so what's your cancellation policy? Do you need a deposit? Are there fees? Like, who pays for the fees? You know, I mean, I know we're getting a little bit into nitty gritty, but these are all things to think about. If you're in a group, right, a creative collective or a band or a group of musicians that are creating together, outside of your, you know, obviously you're going to have your split sheets and stuff, you should have a band agreement. And we've heard how many stories in music of bands breaking up because they couldn't communicate with one another. But if you sit down and talk about, okay, how do we make decisions? Do we have a band leader, or we do everything collectively? Do we vote, or do we, you know, hash it out until we're all on the same page? Who owns things that we buy?
Yeah.
You know, do I keep the amp, or does it become like communal property? So you want to talk about that kind of stuff. If I leave the group, can I still use the logo? Do I still have a claim to things that we created when we were together? You know, what happens if I die? Like, you have to really think about these things. I know, but there is, you know, death and disability, what is it? It's like death, disability, and I forget. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but, you know, these are all things to think about if we decide to part ways.
Right.
If I find out that in all of my contracts, I have social justice clauses. So if I find out that you're racist, sexist, homophobic, any kind of like person causing harm, that can end our contract. So you can put stuff like that in there. What if we don't want to work together anymore? What if Sto wants to run away to Bali and like never be on the internet again? What happens to office hours? So these are all, Tanaja says, these are all valid things to think about. Thank you. So these are all things, you know, it's the little details that you want to think about. I think, well, let me pause there, see if you have anything you want to add, Sto, because I think the next thing to maybe talk about is how do you start to even approach these conversations? Like yeah, how do we start to talk about these things?
Right. Yeah. Because I was going to come from the angle of like, especially with things opening up, like I'm seeing a lot of artists like kind of bunching together about to start going on tour together and stuff like that. I honestly think that's a good time to make sure that, or, I mean, maybe not a contract per se, but never mind. I do think that is a good example for a contract, just because between lodging and, again, like we mentioned earlier, split sheets, who's doing what, who's taking, all that stuff is super important. Because that's another thing I've heard is like tour stories that are just awful because people aren't on the same page. But I'm not going to pretend that I'm a pro at negotiating, let alone like sitting down and talking about contracts. But I think a lot of it is, I mean, obviously you're trying to get as much honest information as possible and making sure that the relationship is equal for both parties. But I think, and Nora mentioned this earlier as well, is like not going into it with the mindset of, oh, they're going to screw me, or they're going to, try to take my properties or whatever. I think that's at least the beginnings of having a good conversation about a contract.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you feel that way about someone from the beginning,
that tells you everything you need to know.
That tells you a lot. And I know this is hard for artists when you're first starting out, but your ability to say no to things, to turn things down, is going to be so important when you get into these negotiations, because then you're moving from a place of power. You know your value, you know your worth, you know your boundaries, you know your limits, you know your yes, you know all these things. And sometimes it means saying no a couple times until you get to those conditions. And if you're afraid that the moment you push back or the moment you negotiate, they're going to be like, bye, okay, forget it, then one, you're never going to get the terms that you want, but maybe that's not the right partnership for you to begin with. So I really do look at the process as an indicator of what the relationship is going to be like. And one thing I will say, and this is something I talk about in the negotiation workshop, is they might say, okay, bye, not right now to you today, and then come back 3 months from now.
Yep.
And then come back. Like, a no is not necessarily the end of the conversation. Yep. And then they can come back and you can revisit things. So contracts, and this is something that, most contracts can be changed. You work together, you decide, okay, this is working, this isn't working, and then you come back and you reevaluate the document. I'm just thinking of more things like you should have in your contracts, like with your manager, who's handling money? What's your process for transparency? Are you keeping receipts? Are you trusting? Right. Is it on the system? Are you like, how's the payout happening? All of that kind of, and putting in like price points. How much can your manager spend on you without your approval versus how much do they need you to sign off on before they go spend that like $2 million or whatever. So even getting into some of those like nitty gritty details are things that you want to see in your contracts.
And I think Nora nailed it earlier too, in saying like, whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, 10 years down the line, like you're allowed to revisit that contract. Times change, things change. I want to say Megan Thee Stallion actually like it was a perfect example of this, but don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure her contract was like pretty dated at first, and then based on her trajectory and how she pretty much just took over the world, like that contract did not serve or properly serve her. In fact, it more so served the label. So she was like, no, we need to renegotiate that stuff. So you're allowed to go back and be like, yo, times have changed, things are different. Let's make sure we get these terms right. So again, it's even on both sides.
Yeah. Well, and you want to make sure that that's in the contract.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
That's usually language like either side can make amendments with written notice and agreement of, whatever, or after 3 months, we'll revisit these terms with an option to renew, but making sure that that contract is what you agree to, unless you say within the contract that you can change your mind and change the contract.
Exactly.
Otherwise you end up stuck. And we've also seen a lot of artists have to do all kinds of things. Prince changed his whole name to get out of his contracts. So
Ocean streamed a whole damn album on Apple Music and said, "I'm out of here." Then
right.
dropped the real record the next day. So it happens. It happens all the time, folks. So, I know contracts can be kind of intimidating. I know even for myself, even reading about them. Oh, hold on. We got a question. What we got here?
Let me pull it up.
Yeah.
Tanaja says, what should you do if someone doesn't want to renegotiate the contract if the language in the contract doesn't allow that? It's a good question. So
that's a great question.
That's a great question. I think at that point, you either try to figure out how to make it work, and again, not a lawyer, so maybe there's an actual better legal answer to this. But what I would do is look at what can we make work, or does the contract end and can I walk away?
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes what's easier is someone's not willing to renegotiate the entire contract, but can you find bits and pieces within the contract that allow you to make those adjustments that you need to make? That's how I would look at it. But it also to understand, and this is something to think about in all kinds of negotiation situations. What is it that they really, really want or need from you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that you're negotiating about is just like a reflection of their deeper needs, motivations, interests. And so if you can really understand what that thing is for them, then you can approach the renegotiation in a way that they see value in giving you the thing that you want versus in them holding on to how they have it as. So it's a little bit of playing these, like understanding their psychology and playing these mind games. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's like a better legal answer, but that's how, from what I can see in the question. So I don't know what you think.
No, I think, again, it really comes down to like Nora said, either working through it if you can, and even again, approaching them with the specific part that maybe you have an issue with, because then maybe you can just have a legitimate conversation and sit down and talk about it. And then, when the contract ends, bail out immediately. Like that's the first thing I think of when I read this. Like, damn, like when you're able to get out, like get out of there. Cause I don't, I don't, depending on the circumstances and stuff like that, I always feel like, if it's something that you can't work through and it's something, where you feel like you're being disrespected or mistreated, like I feel like it is okay to walk away. But, again, I ain't no lawyer. I'm not trying to get people arrested and all that jazz. So
this is a good reminder too, to make sure that your contracts have time limits. So when you're signing a contract,
right.
How long is it good for? Is it 3 months, 6 years, in perpetuity, forever, for the whole universe, or just in California? Time and place are important considerations for your contract. And that's why you see contracts that say for the whole universe, so that if we go live on Mars, like they're going to own your shit on Mars too. So thinking, again, when I say like, it's really about thinking about all the possible scenarios, that's one of those little indicators when they talk about for the whole universe, which I've always thought was funny. I'm like, y'all know something about space travel that the rest of us don't.
Right, that the rest of us don't. Like, damn. But holy moly, we're almost at a half hour. That's very interesting how fast time flies. First off, we appreciate everyone for coming through. Make sure to leave a like. Make sure to subscribe. That's what I forgot. Ring that notification bell so every time we go live, it'll come to your nice cellular device. Also,
share it with a friend. Sorry.
Yeah.
Share it with a friend. I think one of the things, like contracts, negotiation, is one of those areas we don't talk enough about. And so the more that we normalize these conversations, it makes it easier for you to have a conversation about contracts with someone else who's also heard and has this information. Because then you're both coming from the same perspective versus with someone who's like, oh, contracts nasty, and now like you're not coming from the same perspective. So the more I think we normalize these conversations, it's really like we all win. So whether it's this episode or any of the other 25 that we have, share, like, subscribe, but also, tell a friend. Sharing is caring.
Right. Absolutely. We will be back here in 2 weeks. Dang, for Nora's birthday, of course. And we're gonna be doing like a special, like like 20 questions. We haven't really like necessarily ironed out all the details, but if you do have questions that you want us to answer, definitely leave them in the comments section. Whether you're viewing this today or a couple weeks in the future. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, we have a donation link. I keep forgetting about that too. We do have a donation link in the description. Check that out if you feel so inclined. We usually do this, or we always do this for the love, obviously, just trying to spread knowledge. But any money that is donated goes so we can pour it right back into this. So we sincerely appreciate it. Anything else, Nora?
No, thank y'all for hanging out for office hours. We really try to bring practical advice to independent artists so you can stay independent, be successful, do something nice for yourself, take care, drink some water, stretch, go for a walk, do whatever you need to do to love on yourself. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Peace.
Thanks, y'all.